All right, we are going to cover motor case assembly. So this is a fully built motor case. You can see on the inside, we've got our 2 screws for holding the motor tight, and then our properly adjusted gears with a tiny bit of space between. So the reason for having the proper space between is if the gears are too far apart, you will actually roll over the tips of the gears. And if they're too tight together, you're going to grind the gears to each other. So we don't want that. So first thing we're going to do, we take our 2 halves of our motor case. We have our A and our B half. This half is the cover and this half is where the motor will bolt to. We're going to put the bearings inside of these. So just pop the bearings in on either side. Set that off the side. Then we're going to assemble the spur gear and motor shaft. So there's 3 holes on this that mate with the 3 holes on that. We want to make sure that we put the gear on the side with the long center part of the shaft. Line up those holes. And then we're going to take the 3/8 screws, feed them through. And then we're going to take one of the nylock nuts and start it by hand on the back of the screw. And then we'll take our flat wrench and we're going to hold the nut in place with the flat wrench and then use our nut driver to tighten that down. And you don't have to reef super tight. The nylock will hold the screw from backing out. And then we will repeat that with the other 2 screws. And it helps if you put your finger over the back of the nut to hold it in place. And then the last screw. Tighten that down. And then we'll take our motor case half with the small singular hole and then the slot on the side. And we're going to put the shaft into there on the bearing. And then we'll set that to the side. So now we're going to take the pinion gear and the set screw for the pinion gear and we're going to put it on the end of the motor shaft. But we're also going to use some Loctite to make sure that stays in place. So what I like to do is I will actually take the set screw and put it on the end of the Allen wrench. And then I'm going to take my Loctite, and you can use low strength Loctite. You don't want to use anything like the red Loctite that requires heat to get undone. And we're going to put a little drop of it on our set screw. And then I will actually take that and I'm going to start that in our pinion gear. And then on the inside here, we just want to make sure that it is not sticking out so far into there that you can't get it over the end of the shaft. So then you want to line up the flat spot on the shaft with the set screw. And then you want to make sure that the pinion gear is flush with the end of the motor shaft. And then we will tighten that set screw down. And then we can wipe off any excess Loctite. And then as long as that's flush and the set screw is on the flat spot of the shaft, we're good to go. So then we're going to take our case half again. And so the reason we use the Loctite is when we have metal on metal threads, the threads can back out with vibration and stuff like that. Whereas with this one, we have the nylon and the nylock nut in here will actually prevent the threads from backing out. So when we assemble the motor case screws to hold the motor on, we're going to use more Loctite as well. So we'll use the M3x6 screws and then the larger of the washers. I'm going to put that through, and then we're going to again apply a small drop of Loctite to the threads. And then as before, we can feed that onto our tool. And then we are going to put this one through this single hole and out the back side. And then we're going to take our motor case and align one of these two holes with that thread and start it in. And you can bring it up to the surface, but you want it to still be loose enough to rotate. And then we're going to repeat that with the other screw, the other large washer, and a tiny drop of Loctite. And then we'll put this in the other hole on this side. And we don't want it to be tight, we want it to still be able to move side to side. So now, to set our gear mesh between these teeth to the proper distance, we're going to actually take a piece of paper and we're going to put this in between the two gears. And we'll actually smush it down in there in between the two gears. Then we're going to take our other half of our motor case, slide it over, and we're going to use these little pins, key in to orient the motor case. We'll make sure that it's tightened down, and then we're going to tighten both of those screws down. Now they don't have to be reefed tight. You want them to be tight enough that the motor case doesn't wiggle or loosen up, but you don't want to try to strip out the threads or anything in there. And once those are tight, we will open this back up, and we're going to now roll that piece of paper out of there. And now we have our motor case with the proper gear mesh set, and then we will continue and put these 4 screws in the corners. So we'll take the 3/4 inch screws and the number 4 by quarter washer, and we'll slide that into a corner. Take one of the 440 nylock nuts and push this into the edge there. Then we will take our tool, slide it in, and then as we tighten the screw down, once it bottoms out and it's fully seated, you don't have to tighten it any tighter, because again, we're using a nylock nut and that's going to keep it tight from loosening up. The pins in the case are what's going to hold it together from moving around. This is just to hold the 2 case halves together. And then we will repeat that for the next 3 screws. And you can see it on this, you want one of these flat spots on the gear to line up and match with the slot in the motor case. And then tighten the screw down. Once it's tightened, that's all you need to do. So once it engages on the threads, you can tighten it down in there. And the last one. now have a completed motor case with properly set gear mesh, tightened screws, Loctite on the screws that are metal to metal threads, so the pinion set screw and then the motor mounting screws. And then one last thing you can do, so if you're not going to be taking this apart and servicing it between semesters or classes, you can actually take some grease, so like gear lube or whatever. We use just standard RC, like motor case differential lube. You can actually pump some of that into your case to cover your gears. And then you can cover your gears. And if you're worried about dust or anything, you can actually cover this with a piece of, Scotch tape, painter's tape, whatever. So that is a completed motor case.